On man, heir of all ages. If the modern man is indeed the heir of all ages, he is often the kind of heir who tells the family solicitor to sell the whole damned estate, lock, stock, and barrel, and give him a little ready money to throw away at the races or the nightclubs. He is certainly not the kind of heir who ever visits his estate, and if he really owns all the historic land of ancient and modern history, he is a very absentee landlord. He does not really go down to the mines on the historic property, whether they are the caves of the caveman or the catacombs of the Christians, but is content with a very hasty and often misleading report from a very superficial and sometimes dishonest mining expert. He allows any wild theory, like wild thickets of thorn and briar, to grow all over the garden and even the graveyard. He will always believe the modern testimony in a textbook against a contemporary testimony on a tombstone. He sells the family portraits with much more than the carelessness of Charles Surface, and seldom even knows enough about the family even to save a favorite uncle from the wreck. For the adjective fast, which was a condemnation when applied to profligates, has become a compliment when applied to progressives. I know there are any number of men in the modern world to whom all this does not in the least apply, but the point is that, even where it is obviously applicable, it is not thought particularly culpable. Nevertheless, there are some of us who do hold that the metaphor of inheritance from human history is a true metaphor, and that any man who is cut off from the past and content with the future is a man most unjustly disinherited, and all the more unjustly if he is happy in his lot, and not permitted even to know what he has lost. And I, for one, believe that the mind of man is at its largest, and especially at its broadest, when it feels the brotherhood of humanity, linking it up with remote and primitive and even barbaric things. Mr. Christopher Dawson has written studies of historic and prehistoric problems, which have been admired by men distinguished in every way, and especially distinguished from each other. His works have been most warmly praised by critics as different as Dean Ignay, Mr. Aldous Huxley, and the Reverend C.C. Martindale. But I, for one, value his research for one particular reason above the rest, that he has given the first tolerably clear and convincing account of the real stages of what his less lucid predecessors loved to call the evolution of religion. Whether myths and mystical cults were really evolved along one consistent line, I do not know, but theories about mythology or cults or mysteries were most certainly not evolved any consistent line. They cut across each other and almost immediately become a tangle of contradictions. First we had the sun myth, illuminating everything like the sun, and enabling Bishop Whately to prove that Napoleon was a mythical character. Then we had Herbert Spencer and Grant Allen, who said that everything came from ghosts and graves and the worship of ancestors. And then Professor Fraser, who, with all his genius, could not see the sacred tree for the golden bough. Now, whatever else is true of these theories of evolution, they are not evolved. The grave does not grow out of the sun, nor even the oak out of the grave. And on no possible theory is Fraser a development of Spencer. They are contrary guesses, and if there is evidence for all of them, as no doubt there is, the evidence only increases the confusion. Mr. Dawson has ordered the confusion without contradicting the evidence, and his conclusion is that there were broadly 4 stages in the spiritual story of humanity. The first notion, with which the lowest and most primitive savages seem to have begun, was very much like the notion with which many of our higher thinkers hope all humanity will end. It was a broad belief in what is now called the spiritual element in life. In a spirit almost impersonal, but still superior to our material minds, of which we may gain encouraging glimpses and visions. This is the stage of the shaman, or medicine man, who as an independent individual mystic can tap the vast and vague supernatural powers that pervade the world. By special magic rites, with special material objects, herbs or stones or whatnot, he could release the mysterious force. For note that this is not pantheism. The sacred tree is hidden in the wood, or the dryad is imprisoned in the tree. Now I could not be content with this magic, whether or no it suits the higher thinkers. But I have no sympathy for the man who has no sympathy with this magic. I count no man large-minded or imaginative who has not sometimes felt like a medicine man. It is quite natural to me, walking in the woods, to wonder fancifully whether whistling back the note of a certain bird or tasting the juice of a certain berry would release a glamour or give back a fairyland. I call that being the heir of all ages. The second stage is that of the static archaic culture, in which a whole people live a ritual life generally found on the season of seed or harvest, in which there is no distinction between sacred and profane, because plowing or fishing are religious forms, and no distinction between king and priest, because the sacred emperor rules the whole world of ritual like a god. China and Egypt and other cultures were of that sort. Here again I should be dissatisfied with a religion that was a pageant of nature, for I feel the soul, in Sir Thomas Browne's noble phrase, as something other than the elements that owe it no homage under the sun. But I am much more dissatisfied with a man pretending to be a man of culture who merely despises that ritual. I can never see the pageant of harvest without feeling that it is religious, and it gratifies me to think that I am feeling like the first emperor of China. I call that being the heir of all ages. The third phase described is the rise of the world religions, the moral and universal religions, for Buddha and Confucius and the Hebrew prophets and the first Greek philosophers appeared roughly about the same time. And with them appeared the idea expressed in Sir Thomas Browne's phrase, that the soul is greater than the sun. Henceforth, the conscience is more than the cosmos. Either it condemns the cosmos or ignores the cosmos, as in Buddhism, or it gives it a mystical meaning, as in Platonism, or it sees it as an instrument for producing a grander good, as in Judaism and Christianity. Now I do not myself care about the Buddhist extreme, which almost unmakes the world to make the soul. I do not like nirvana, which seems indistinguishable from death. But I would not be seen dead in a field, not in a field of any paradise, negative or positive, with the man who has no admiration for the superb renunciation of Buddha, or for the Western equivalent, the star-defying despair of the Stoics. No man has really been alive who has not at some time felt that the skies might fall so that justice within his conscience should be done. In the richer tapestry of the Christian there is also a dark thread of the Stoic. I call that being the heir of all ages. I will not complete the 4 phases here, because the last deals with the most controversial question of the Christian system. I merely use them as a convenient classification to illustrate a neglected truth: that a complete human being ought to have all these things stratified in him, so long as they are in the right order of importance, and that man should be a prince looking for a pinnacle of a tower built by his fathers, and not a contemptuous cad perpetually kicking down the ladders by which he climbed.